Valentino Reyes knew the sound of bad code the same way a musician knows when a piano is out of tune. 2 decades of cramming exploits into corporate firewalls had trained her ears to pick up disharmony, even in silence. So when a compressed hiss threaded through the evening track of the new meditation app she had been hired to audit, her eyelid twitched in a reflex older than muscle memory. ZenFlow marketed itself as calm in your pocket. It sat at the top of every App Store chart, and half the commuters on the L train wore its pastel lotus icon like a badge of sanity. The contract in Vail's inbox was routine, a rapid security assessment before the company filed for its inevitable IPO. They wanted to be able to say with a straight face that an independent expert had blessed their code. She almost didn't take the job. 3 gigs were already in progress, and she preferred digging through firmware, not digital aromatherapy. He'd taken her into the suite and she'd blown her curtains, and she'd blown the wine curtains on him right there, as if he'd plunged his arm into the water to rescue her in the Baruch. They wanted to give her the firmware, not digital aromatherapy, but the fee had an extra 0, the kind that made rent disappear for 6 months, and the request came with an NDA so dense it practically sweated fear. Fear, Vail had learned, meant something interesting was buried beneath the pleasantries. At 2:17 on a gray Wednesday, she booted a sandboxed phone, downloaded ZenFlow's Tuesday evening Serenity session, and pumped the audio through a spectral analyzer. Peaks rose at 400, 1,000, 3,000 hertz, the standard staples of spa music. Then a faint, crooked ridge shimmered between 19 and 20 kilohertz. Too high for average ears, though some people claimed to feel it, as pressure behind the eyes. When she isolated that band and amplified it, the signal resolved into pulses, 60-second cycles nested within 5-minute envelopes, all writing a 9-minute progression. She leaned back in her rolling chair, half-finished bubble tea sweating on the desk, and whispered, "You're not a melody at all. You're a pattern." Her contract didn't require she listen to the tracks, but curiosity beat protocol. She fetched wireless headphones, closed her eyes, and hit play. The public portion of the recording was standard boilerplate. A velvet-voiced narrator inviting her to breathe, notice the temperature of the air, loosen her jaw, but the inaudible layer seeped through the diaphragm of the headphones like a pulse from the ocean floor, faster then slower, weaving in step with the script. 3 minutes passed before the room moved. It didn't move exactly, rather, the corners of the apartment tilted toward her like excited dogs, stretching into impossible angles and melting back into normal geometry before she could flinch. Vail ripped off the headphones, heart hammering. Her terminal's clock marked 2:26. The hallucination had lasted maybe 4 seconds. Dread pooled in her sternum, pure, chemical dread that had no respect for rational thought. She had seen things before, after 50-hour code sprints, in the metallic hour between caffeine and sleep. Those phantoms were smudges or fleeting reflections. What she experienced just now had possessed weight, mass, and an eerie intentionality. She set the phone aside. Time to earn that extra 0. 1. Packet traces and subway maps. By dawn, she'd pinned the audio fingerprint to a content delivery subdomain that spun up new servers every afternoon. The files were never more than 6 hours old. At 8:12, the DNS records pivoted to fresh IP addresses in Frankfurt, Sao Paulo, Singapore, depending on whose rush hour was inbound. Vail reclined and watched the hops populate like flowers on a time-lapse. It wasn't just one file. The entire catalog of ZenFlow's commute sessions, branded blue thumbnails with titles like Elevated Focus and Traffic Tranquility, were salted with those hidden pulses. Other categories, sleep, study, new parents, were clean. Someone had designed an ultrasonic track specifically for people clustered on buses and trains between 7 o'clock, 19 o'clock, and again 16 o'clock, 19 o'clock local time. She pulled public transportation data, overlaid it with download metrics scraped from the app's poorly protected analytics endpoint, and felt her pulse quicken. Usage spikes aligned with ridership surges down to the minute. Something about being in a crowd seemed central to the scheme. Yet if there'd been mass hallucinations on Chicago's Red Line, local news would be hysterical. She combed police blotters for the last 3 months. Incidents of mass confusion, shared delusions, and unexplained visual disturbances had indeed risen, but they were subtle. Vehicle pileups blamed on sun glare. Pedestrians convinced they saw a second moon reflected in river glass. Commuters who froze at turnstiles insisting they'd glimpsed tunnels curling into infinity. No event big enough to trend, nothing that couldn't be rationalized and forgotten by morning meetings. She poured the logs into a notebook and texted Jay. Need your ears and weird science kit. Bring coffee. Urgent. Jay Moon had once remastered Lost Punk singles for a defunct record label before pivoting to neuroacoustics at Northwestern. He arrived an hour later with an analog oscilloscope, 2 lattes, and an expression halfway between thrill and anxiety. Vale briefed him while patching her desktop's audio output into his oscillator. Sub-20 mix-range pulses nested in spa music. Jay stroked his dyed silver stubble. Okay, that can do things. Not on its own, but you ever hear of Ganzfeld protocols? Sensory homogenization? Sure, right. People in a scrambled environment, white noise headphones, ping-pong balls over their eyes, start hallucinating quickly because the brain gets bored and begins manufacturing stimuli. Now imagine a commute, monotonous scenery, rhythmic train clatter, faces you ignore. Pipe in targeted ultrasonics tuned to approximate theta waves, and you've got a mobile Ganzfeld chamber. Vale raised an eyebrow. So, Zenflow's soundtrack nudges writers into a mild dissociative state, but why? The question dangled. People monetize boredom all the time, but mass hallucinations? That was overkill. 2. Digging under the lotus. The next layer of analysis came easy. Zenflow's Android build had been obfuscated, but not for someone who'd cut her teeth on Stuxnet disassemblies. Vale traced the content calls to a private Git repository. The commit history showed 2 distinct authors, corporate engineers with standard email and a masked contributor whose handle was simply Gardner. Every modification by Gardner referenced the rush hour frequency packets, merged after midnight, skipped code review, but carried the highest privileges. She attempted to clone the repo, access denied, fine, analog approach. The app's licensed server required device registration, and the certificate contained a dev comment with an IPv6 address outside Zenflow's declared AWS range. Vale tunneled through her VPN, found a login portal branded Petal. The splash screen bore an SC Lotus superimposed on a subway map, password field only. She tried basic SQL injection, select, proved etched. Login responded with XMet. User not in bloom. Cute. Rate limiting locked her out after 3 attempts, heavy enough that persistence might burn her origin IP in the contract along with it. She exhaled. There was still a social vector. If Gardner existed, he or she logged pushes somewhere, and those pushes had to originate from an ISP, a building, a seat unless they were funneling through Tor exit nodes in Kazakhstan, in which case her odds shrank. Before Vale could spiral, her inbox chimed. Unknown address. Subject, you looked behind the breathwork curtain. Body contained a single line. I prefer hydrangeas to lotuses. Please stop pruning. Below that, an attachment. 4F574C ASCII hex. She converted it. Owl. Random threat? Or signature? She showed Jay, who tapped an anxious rhythm on the desk. Gardner's watching you root through their flower bed. Vale cracked her knuckles. Let's watch back. They routed phone traffic through an inline packet sniffer, rode the subway at rush hour, headphones off to avoid direct sonic exposure. The platform teemed with people on the same pastel icon. Every time a user hit play, the packet header lit fluorescent orange on Jay's laptop. 1 hop, 2, 3, then out via a Tier 1 backbone to an unregistered block. Petabytes per day, Vale estimated off books. Back at her apartment, they geolocated the hops to a data center on the city's south side, an unremarkable warehouse previously occupied by a fulfillment startup that had died during the pandemic. Public records showed a new tenant, Contineo Analytics, incorporated 8 months ago. Vale's phone buzzed again. New coordinates, Bryn headphones, no signature. Coordinates corresponded to the same warehouse. Trap, Jay said. Obviously. Going? Obviously. 3. The warehouse. They arrived at 1632, cusp of evening rush. The warehouse front door was open, man-trap vestibule illuminated but unattended. Vale disabled the inner maglock with a borrowed keycard writer she kept for boring corporate pen tests. Inside, racks of servers hummed under violet LEDs. The air smelled of ozone and new wiring. A single monitor glowed at the far end. The screen divided into quadrants. Downtown traffic cams, subway CCTV, heartbeat-like graphs, updating in real time. Beside it lay a pair of what resembled over-ear headphones, except the pads were studded with metallic nodules. Jay scanned a graph. That's real-time ingestion. They're pulling biometric telemetry from the phones. Vale slid into the rolling chair, fingers dancing across the keyboard. No login prompt. The desktop was unlocked. A text file open on Notepad read, "Hydrangeas require pruning too." Below, shell history showed a script named Mass_Bloom SH queued for 17 o'clock, local. "Bloom," Jay murmured. "Rush hour riders about to get level 2. Vale tailed the script. It stitched together frequency envelopes more aggressive than the one she'd sampled interlaced infrasonics, amplitudes flirting with OSHA limits. If transmitted, those signals could push listeners past mild geometry warps into full sensory override. She pictured buses crammed with bodies tilting into kaleidoscopes, drivers blinking at non-existent exits. "Disable the script," Jay said. Vale hesitated. An on-site shutdown would stop one center. How many data hubs worldwide? Gardner could redeploy with a keystroke. They needed a louder kill switch, something public, something that would force Zenflow Corporate to distance themselves and regulators to intervene. She unzipped a drive from her backpack. Pinata, named for its contents, prearranged torrents of corporate dirty laundry ready to burst when cracked. Vale usually employed Pinata against oil conglomerates. Tonight, a meditation unicorn would suffice. She scraped every drive folder, zipped it, encrypted with a one-time pad, and prepared an upload to a dead man switch. If she didn't ping it every 30 minutes, the archive would unlock onto social networks and leak sites. Insurance? She shrugged at Jay. They still had 15 minutes to 17 o'clock. She executed a local cron job that swapped the Bloom payload for 30 seconds of white noise followed by a spoken message. "This is an unscheduled maintenance test. Please remove your headphones." Barely a finger in the dam, but better than nothing. An adjacent tab on the workstation displayed a Slack channel labeled Orchard. Messages scrolled. "Peers ready? Cherries aligned?" The tone was jocular, urgent. Gardner posted, "Vale, we could have partnered." "Don't force winter." At that moment the server room lights flickered. Doors clanked shut. Vale's stomach dropped. The entire building had just pulled itself offline from the grid, backup batteries humming. "Lockdown," Jay said, "and we're inside the cage." Vale slammed out a broadcast across the Orchard channel. "People of Zenflow, your rush hour track triggers medically untested hallucinations. Code proof attached. Injunctions incoming unless Bloom is permanently shelved." As she hit enter, a private DM popped. "You mistake pruning for arson. Come upstairs." Upstairs? She scanned the architectural plans on the municipal database. A mezzanine once used for drone testing. The elevator was decommissioned, but stairs were accessible through a door past the last server row. "Stay or follow?" she asked Jay. "I'm not letting you meet the wizard alone." 4. The wizard in the greenhouse. The mezzanine was a greenhouse of cables. LED strips bathed the space in shifting gradients. In the center sat a man in a wheelchair, laptop balanced on his knees, soil-covered gloves still on his fingers. Plants, real plants, clustered around him in hydroponic racks. Orchids, succulents, hydrangeas. He greeted them with a gentle nod. Valentina Reyes, chronic breaker of things, and Jay Moon, the audiophile who once reversed Pink Floyd's Hidden Whispers for Reddit karma. Welcome. Vale scanned him for weapons, saw none. Gardner, I presume, among other handles. His voice had the calm cadence of Zenflow's narrators. Shall we talk before you turn my orchard to compost? Shall we talk? Vale said. In 8 minutes the dead man's switch tarnishes your IPO forever. A chuckle. I never cared about the IPO. Zenflow's board will claim they were hacked. The classic rogue employee yarn. I accepted that risk. You built an unsubtle mind control signal into a daily ritual. Why? He wheeled closer. Sweat beaded at his hairline. Screens fracture attention. We doom scroll, road rage, hate each other in 15-second loops. I wanted to prove we can still feel something together. Real awe, the mythic, hallucination as community. Jay barked a laugh. You risked pile-ups on the Dan Ryan for an art project? Not art. Neuroarchitecture, Gardner corrected. Imagine if, for 5 minutes every day, commuters saw the city draped in impossible color, remembered childhood dreams, felt the presence of others. Empathy blooms when reality loosens. Vale folded her arms. Empathy didn't bloom the night my living room turned into an Escher sketch. I felt terror. Terror is the first petal, he said softly. You acclimate, then wonder follows. She took a step forward. Did you test this on yourself? He gestured at his chair. Bone cancer precludes public transit. But I remote monitored, curated intensity, kept bloom below full psychotic threshold. Threshold? You're quantifying psychosis? Psychosis is simply a departure from consensus. Consensus can be improved. He eyed Vale with something like pity. Hackers sell exploits that bankrupt retirees, pharmaceutical reps push opioids. My sin is wonder? Vale's hands tightened. Wonder without consent is violation. Gardner sighed. Consent is a fiction. Did commuters consent to billboard jingles? To the algorithm that decides which podcast ad shouts from their earbuds? That's a commercial annoyance, not an induced shared hallucination. Line crossed. Lines are chalk on rain-soaked pavement, he murmured. Jay stepped between them. Words aside, the tech is raw. People will crash cars. Someone with epilepsy could seize. Gardner's gaze flicked down. Edge cases, tragic, yes. Yet the city's spending one afternoon as a breathing mural? Can you imagine the ripple in civic mood? Crime statistics? Enough, Vale said. Shut it down, delete every copy, and release a public apology. That's my offer. He typed, one-handed, projected 3 windows of code mid-air through a Pico projector. Plan B, then. All cameras in the greenhouse pivoted toward them. Vale's phone vibrated, streaming data surge. He was broadcasting the standoff. Gardner spoke to the lens. Humanity stands at an attentional cliff. 2 options, crash in rage or leap in shared dream. Tonight, I prove dream is viable. He slapped enter. Alarms wailed downstairs. Bloom re-unveiled 5. Race against the Bloom Vale bolted for the stairs, Jay on her heels. Over the PA, Gardner's voice boomed. 90 seconds to synchronization. He must have left a pre-recorded message. At the workstation, Vale's substituted white noise was already purged. The mass_Bloom ship script pushed to mirrors worldwide. She opened the terminal, typed PS aux. grep. Bloom. A dozen processes spawning children across each core. She could kill them one by one, but they'd respawn. She needed root kill. She keyed sudo but lacked credentials. Gardner had revoked privileges. Root or nothing, she muttered. Hardware kill? Jay pointed to the main breaker panel behind server racks. Pop the power. Phil hesitated. The UPS battery arrays would keep systems afloat for 5, maybe 10 minutes. Enough to inject the signal, then gracefully dump to disaster recovery nodes across the net. Her eyes tracked the fiber uplink port blinking green. Severing connectivity would starve the distribution chain. But fiber strands were armored glass buried beneath metal conduits. Unless... She rummaged in her backpack, produced a narrow hydraulic cutter. Technically for bike locks. Jay's eyebrows shot up. Always carry tamperware, she said. They pried open the conduit. Twin yellow strands gleamed. She positioned the cutter. On the monitor, countdown hit 0:30. Cut both? Jay asked. Transmit needs one. I'll sever send but keep receive to monitor. She crimped strand A. Lights on core router switched from green to red. Graphs plummeted. 018 upstream failover triggered. Screen showed satellite link negotiation. Continuo had redundancy. Bastard thought of everything. Vale spit. She slashed the second fiber. Satellite handshake died mid-packet. A hiss of fans dipped. The building's IntelliCool system panicked as network-attached sensors lost heartbeats. 009, Gardner's voice returned over battery-powered speakers. Connectivity lost. Fallback local broadcast initiated. Local? Jay echoed. Vale realized phones can connect via BLE beacons to sideload content. The servers could have pre-pushed Bloom packets into commuter devices earlier. Time to unlock at 17 o'clock, independent of backbone. 005, her lungs squeezed. Not enough. We have to jam the signal. EMP? Jay joked, then stopped. Wait, Bluetooth uses 2.4 gig. Microwave oven trick? Vale sprinted to the break room they'd passed, yanked an industrial microwave from a counter, smashed the timer knob to permanent on. They dragged it into the server hall, unplugged the redundant link cable, shoved a nest of Bluetooth beacons inside, slammed door. Microwave unshielded cables? They had none. But inside, the beacons would fry themselves instead of broadcasting. 002, within the shielding of the oven, the beacon sparked. Acrid smoke leaked. 001. Silence then. Nothing. Screens flatlined. No pulse graph. Jay exhaled a ragged laugh. Vale wasn't ready to celebrate. She tapped her phone. Zenflow attempted to contact host. Failed. App displayed generic error. They did it. Maybe. 6. Falling petals night settled on the city. Commuters would feel only the ordinary claustrophobia of traffic. Vale, however, felt drained. Marrow deep, they ascended to the greenhouse. Gardner still sat motionless, expression unreadable. The industrial lights above flashed blue-red. Police sirens dancing outside sheet windows. I alerted them after you locked us in, Vale said. Gardner nodded. Truth escapes any net eventually. Paramedics rolled him past nodding hydrangeas, down to waiting cruisers. As he vanished, Vale wondered whether she'd just prevented a tragedy or aborted an era-defining experiment. The moral ledger was murky. Outside, wind rattled chain-link fences. Jay touched her shoulder. You good? No, she admitted, but better than the alternative. Sirens dopplered away, clouds thinned, a sliver of silver moon cutting through. For a moment, Vale imagined the city breathing, glass facades pulsing like living cells. Not a hallucination, just exhaustion writing poetry on vision. She embraced it, then let it fade. 7. Epilogue. After images. 3 days later, Zenflow's CEO streamed an apology, tears calibrated for sincerity, blaming a rogue engineer. Gardner's name never surfaced. Medical records protected his identity. The company recalled its commute playlists, paused the IPO, promised independent oversight of any future neural entrainment tools. Yet rumors sprouted on fringe forums, mirrored torrents of the Bloom signal. Enthusiasts seeking collective lucid trips. Vale found her handle tagged in threads begging for technical help to resurrect the pulses. She ignored them. The dead man's switch remained armed, but dormant. She visited the warehouse once more before Continuo's assets were seized. The plants in the greenhouse had wilted without their caretaker, petals carpeting the floor like confetti from a canceled parade. Among them, one hydrangea had survived, a stubborn burst of blue. Vale clipped a small cutting, carried it home, and set it in water by her window. She did not play music to it, only silence. Some hours the apartment looked normal. Others the walls breathed lightly, as if remembering frequencies no longer present. She accepted the afterimages as part of the price. Whether Gardner was right that awe could mend a broken attention span remained unsettled. But she believed one thing with certitude. Consent isn't chalk on wet pavement. It is bedrock. Without it, wonder mutates into harm. She opened her laptop, deleted the ZenFlow binaries, and began drafting a paper, Security Implications of Subliminal Audio in Mass-Adopted Wellness Platforms. She owed the world at least that map of the minefield. Outside, traffic murmured. Nothing strange, nothing extraordinary. Yet in the hush between engines she caught a phantom chord, like a far-off melody that might have been the city itself tuning for the next act. She paused, listened, let it pass, then returned to the keyboard where lines of code promised new harmonies, hopefully honest ones this time.